description is in the book or what it's talking about this panel? Can somebody tell me? Is it
Madness.
It's madness. It is madness. We are mad just for coming here. But it should be called What is Reality? Okay, perfect. That's what it says there. So we're at the right panel, yay. So many of you probably came to this convention because you're interested in anime, you're interested in video games, and you're interested in the story, the compelling storytelling, and the cool graphics, and all the swords and fighting, and amazing, space kills and interdimensional travel, and all these things that the anime and this lore bring to us, right? We're attracted to these things. Most of you may or may not know that in addition to my acting work as Dante in Devil May Cry, which we just did that on earlier, Ken Masters, and I have this amazing stunt career that I've been working in Hollywood stunt films for years and years. But in addition to all that, I am also what is called a ufologist, right? Someone who studies UFOs and paranormal things. And I've been doing this on the side for over a decade. And I've won awards, I've put together big production documentaries, as well as events. I produced a thing in Hollywood or in Washington, D.C. called the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, which was a mock congressional hearing with 6 former members of Congress, 1 senator, and we brought over 40 witnesses, mostly ex-military, government officials, heads of SACMUD bases, former minister or Secretary of Defense of Canada, and a lot of bigwigs in military and government to testify to the fact that we're being engaged by an extraterrestrial presence. This was at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2013. I got an award for that at a UFO convention. I get invited to UFO conventions to speak because of my work in that world. So this is the panel where I get to merge those two worlds, where I get to take all my acting and fun stunt work and then all my research into the paranormal and the crazy stuff to find out what kind of reality are we actually living in, and then to bring it in together. So this is like the mixture of those worlds. So I appreciate you guys coming in and hear me go off on this stuff because it's not often that I do get to mix these worlds. And I'm usually wearing 2 hats in this sort of my career and stuff. I also produce a show called Interview with Ed, Extra Dimensionals, where I actually sit down. And this is my belief, and I'm not saying this is actually the way it is. You guys can make your own decisions on it. But it's my belief that I'm sitting down and I'm actually talking to aliens. I'm talking to people who channel extra-dimensional, interdimensional beings, however you want to say it, to have a conversation with them. This TV show is now currently the #1 show on the Gaia Network. I don't know if you've heard of Gaia. Maybe it's popped on your YouTube channel or on your advertisement on Facebook. But they picked up the show. I've been working on the show since 2014, but they picked it up in last March, and they started airing the episodes. And it went from just a little tiny show in the back that they just picked up to now the #1 show on Gaia. So super excited to have that status. And I went to a UFO convention the other day, a couple weekends ago, and all these people were coming up to me like, "Oh my God, you're Reuben Langdon." And usually it's like, "You're Reuben Langdon, Dante." And I was waiting for the Dante, and I was like, "Interview with Ed." I'm like, "Oh my God, what? How do you know this?" And they said, "Yeah, your show is like #1, tracking #1 guy right now." So it was like, oh my God, it's crazy. So really, these 2 different worlds, these 2 different hats, are the popularity of Dante, the popularity of Reuben in Interview with Ed. It's like, but now it's like pineapple pen thing. that gets to happen. So how I'd like to start with all this is give you guys today's sort of class, welcome class, and I'd like to give you guys a vocabulary, an understanding of what I've gone off on weird tangents talking with aliens, but basically my tangents have brought me back to the understanding of what our reality is made of, and that we have a lot of proof and evidence from studies in quantum physics and the quantum realms, and also in just hard regular physics that sort of tell us a story that we're not really told in school. But these are actual evidence-based discoveries that I'm going to share with you tonight. And at the very end, I'll sort of connect the dots like a replicator from Star Trek is not that far off the holodeck from Star Trek. A lot of these concepts and ideas that we have, that we think are science fiction, we actually have the beginnings of right now. Like, did you know we can teleport stuff? Did anybody know that? That's real. Now, it's in a finite version of it, just small electrons right now, but in a way, it's information. More information can be teleported. But we're getting to closer and closer to actually teleporting matter. So this is where, again, I just jumped ahead to the end of the show right there, but we're going to reel it back, and I'll start you off slow and easy. And I can take questions throughout this if they're really urgent, but I'm going to try to get through most of the basic stuff, and then we'll have sort of Q&As again on top. And through this, again, my goal is to sort of educate everybody and to let you know what I've learned over the years from studying science, from studying quantum physics, and also having interactions with beings who are actually saying the same thing, coming from other dimensional realms. And that's way out there, and that's a big pill to swallow. You don't have to go there just yet. By the end of the night tomorrow, you'll be like, yeah, let's talk to some higher dimensional beings. So, what is reality? Let's see. Reality is, well, it's like, or life, I should say, is like a video game. We all love our games, right? We play games. How many guys play video games? Pretty much everybody who's here. A few of you who don't probably play board games. How many guys play board games? Okay, some people, right? They're coming back. So, in fact, we've heard this a lot. Life is a lot like a video game. I'm going to prove that life is exactly like a video game by the end of this panel. Elon Musk seems to think that we're in some sort of simulation or some sort of video game type concept, and here's some words that he has to share about it.
I think here's, remember, like the strongest argument.
Okay, I lied. Let me get the volume going on this, because that's not cool. Let's see.
I think here's, remember, like the strongest argument for us being in a simulation, probably being in a simulation, I think is the following. That 40 years ago, we had Pong, like two rectangles and a dot. That was what games were. Now, 40 years later, we have photorealistic 3D simulations with millions of people playing simultaneously, and it's getting better every year. And soon we'll have virtual reality, augmented reality. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, then the games will become indistinguishable from reality. Just indistinguishable. Even if that rate of advancement drops by 1,000 from what it is right now, then you just say, okay, well, let's imagine it's at 10,000 years in the future, which is nothing in the evolutionary scale. So given that we're clearly on a trajectory to have games that are indistinguishable from reality, and those games could be played on any set-top box or on a PC or whatever, and there would probably be, billions of such, computers with set-top boxes, it would seem to follow that the odds that we're in base reality is 1 in billions. The argument is probably, I just like, is there a flaw in that argument?
I mean,
I'm not sure what the error.
No, the argument makes sense. So the assumption then is that somebody beat us to it, and this is a game.
No, there's a 1 in billions chance that this is base reality.
Oh, okay. What do you think?
Well, I think it's 1 in billions.
Okay.
I mean, that seems to be like clearly what it suggests.
Right.
And actually, I mean, arguably we should hope that that's true, because otherwise, if civilization stops advancing, then that may be due to some calamitous event that erases civilization. So maybe we should be hopeful that this is a simulation, because otherwise...
So they can reboot it.
Well, otherwise, either we're going to create simulations that are indistinguishable from reality, or civilization will cease to exist. Those are the two options.
So Elon Musk is pretty confident that we're in a simulation. We're either in a simulation or we're going to destroy ourselves. That's his. He seems to be. He's one of the smartest guys on the planet. Right? He's the guy that's building the hypertube and hyperloop or whatever he's doing. In that sense, he's sending rockets out into space. SpaceX is creating Tesla, the cars, right? The electrical company. So it's not just Elon, but it's several people in the science, not only in the scientific community, but some of the top minds of the world seem to think we're in a simulation. So what does that mean? What does it mean if we are in a simulation? Does that mean we cease to exist? Are we just a bunch of NPCs? We've heard this term thrown around a bit in different ways. But us gamers know really what an NPC is. Are we just NPCs in some weird, crazy Sims game? Perhaps. But does that make life any less valuable? Maybe, maybe not. I start with this because just to give you some context of where things are going. So if we are in a simulation, wouldn't it be cool to know the cheat codes? If we are in a game, like to know the codes to how to like get to the next level or have 100 lives or be in a constant state of being able to throw fireballs, right? This would be amazing. So if there is this simulation, if this idea of a simulation, there should be cheat codes, right? Just as there is in a real game. So my goal today is to teach you guys the cheat codes. I know this sounds like a crazy thing to say, but when you understand the game and you start learning the cheat codes, then you can navigate this reality thing a little bit easier. And that's what we're going to start with today, and we'll go deep into that tomorrow. So before we even go into cheat codes, we kind of know what type of game we're playing. Are we playing a shooter, a fighting game, a horror game? There's all different types of games, and each game has its own set of rules. So if you don't know the rules of the game, then you're kind of just mashing buttons and trying to figure it out as you go along. Most of us are doing that every day. We're just mashing buttons and trying to figure it out, right? Trying to like, what is this thing we call reality, and how does it all work? And we're told this from these people, and we're told that from that religion, and we're told this, but it just doesn't. It's like, I don't know. It works sometimes. What if it worked all the time? What you were truly with, like, if you knew the game you're playing, you knew the rules, then you can navigate it, and it actually worked. It's like when you push the X button, and you're going to get a punch every time. Like, that's the type of game we want to play, because now we know we're playing a fighting game. If you push X, you get a punch. So a lot of times we don't even know what game we're playing. So again, going back to the language, what I'm trying to do here today is to give everybody a language, a format, something to put a foot on so they can go to the next level, to the next level, to the next level, and climb the ladder. So yeah, this is just a cool graphic. How many of you guys have heard of Nikola Tesla, right? Most of you guys here, but it's crazy. I was at a high school a couple weeks ago, and I asked the same question. Who has heard of Nikola Tesla? One hand went up. Only one hand. And I was in a school of like 40 kids, Steve? Yep. It was crazy. We know Tesla because he's in all the movies, right? In all of our YouTube videos and everything else. We know, everybody's seen that, what is that, the rap beat off with, rap off with Tesla and Edison.
Epic rap battles of history.
Yes, exactly. So Tesla may have been a rapper, I don't know, but he actually was one of the most brilliant minds on the planet of his time. Still today, there's a lot of mystery around him, and this is why we have movies like The Prestige, where David Bowie portrayed him, and he shows up in this sort of magical way. Because even today, there's like, how did he die? It's kind of, maybe he died in his hotel room, but there was mystery surrounding that. Why did the FBI see all sounds like they're tapping into some big
That was
truths.
introduced by Jack Kirby in the new Belgian LS.
Okay, cool. There's some big truths that he's going.
Yeah, he worked with Stan. I mean, he also did that Marvel Cosmic stuff too. He went to DC afterwards.
He's tapped in. I gotta have a conversation again.
That guy's dead since the 90s.
He's dead since the night, so you can have a conversation with him. Not in this form of fashion. But, anyways, great, thank you. There's, what's your name, brother?
Brian. I was there earlier.
Yeah, so Brian definitely brought up some stuff. So this stuff is coming out to the mainstream more and more. In truth, if you talk to any physicist, any scientist, everything is a vibrational frequency, including this table. Everything is vibrating at a unique vibrational frequency. The chair you're sitting on, the rug, the carpet, us, any form of anything in this reality is vibrating, and this sort of goes to the string theory a little bit, we can touch on that. But basically, everything in our reality is made up of vibrations and frequency. And have you guys, how many of you guys have heard of cymatics? Yes or no? Okay. I've got a little video to show. So cymatics is something that's we've known for a long time, but it's basically when you take, usually with salt or liquid or something, and you put a musical tone, specific tone to it, it starts to take form.
Cymatics?
Cymatics, not semantics. Cymatics. But this is a great little video to show you visually and audibly how this works.
The film you are about to see has no characters. If you spare a little of your imagination, it is a film to describe to you the effect of cymatic frequencies on matter.
Actually salt being put on a plate, and then at these different frequencies, 345 hertz, you'll see off to the left it changes 133 hertz. So each frequency creates a unique pattern on the plate, and this can be done on a speaker. This can be, you can see this in water and any sort of liquid or substance that it just instantly takes a specific shape. And you'll see the transformation from one hertz to the next instantaneously. So there's actual geometry being formed from sound vibrations. Sometimes very complex. Usually the higher the frequency you go, the more complex the frequencies start to take form. So how many guys knew that this even happened? This is part of it. Okay, so it's not that it's been around for a while. It's not that new, but we have YouTube now to get videos that we can show this. So if everything is a sound vibration that actually is forming geometrical figures, then there is another language that we can use called math. You know, and there's, how many guys know about the Fibonacci sequence? Okay, yay! So we have some Fibonacci people out there. Good, because this is literally one of the unifications in all of life. We can see this mathematical formula in everything, from, you know, ooh, something big's going on over there. From, you know, the shape of our faces to, you know, big in Leonardo da Vinci and his artwork goes, everything is Fibonacci sequentially accurate, right? And we, as human beings, like the measurements from our tip of our fingers to the next bone, to the next bone, to the next bone, like all of that is Fibonacci accurate. Even though we individually have a unique bone structure and that's different than everybody else, we still carry the Fibonacci sequence within each and every single one of us in our creation. So this is one of the unification ideas. The sound vibration creates matter, math, geometry, which then creates life. So you're seeing the connections a little bit? Have you guys heard of the pistol shrimp? All right. Do you know what kind of power the pistol shrimp can harness? Oh, we got somebody in the back there. Let's watch this video and find out.
Far from being quiet, the ocean is filled with a cacophony of animal noise that can even disrupt the sonic transmissions of submarines. Most of the din is made by a surprisingly insignificant creature, the pistol shrimp. By snapping its claws, it can not only make communication sounds, but something far deadlier. These shrimps are its prey. It deals a knockout blow from a distance by using its claw as a sonic weapon. First, its claw is cocked like a pistol, then fired. The effect is literally stunning. As the claw snaps shut, it fires a blast of bubbles. Incredibly, as the bubbles collapse, they momentarily reach the temperature of the sun. This implosion causes a shockwave that stuns.
Did he just say it creates a shockwave momentarily with the power of the sun? With the heat of the sun, right? Now that's pretty hot if you guys have ever been out in the sun, which I'm sure you have. So how is that possible? How can this little creature that lives underwater generate from its claw the power of the sun? Vibration, frequency, energy. So if you simply think about it, if it's a vibration, if everything is vibration and energy, if you match the frequency that the sun is giving off, doesn't matter if you're underwater or above water or wherever it is, then you can generate the power of the sun, if everything is frequency and vibration. If I take the frequency and vibration of this table, and I am somehow able to project the frequency and vibration of all the molecules and everything that makes up this table, in theory, I could create this table over there in another room. Let's see what, you guys know who Michio Kaku is, right? He's like on TV all the time, Discovery Channel and all that stuff, right? He's a smart dude with like big poofy hair, kind of like Einstein, but Asian. And he's got some smart things to say. Let's hear what he has to say.
We physicists believe, for example, that there is really a multiverse that exists even inside our living room. We are waves, vibrating waves given by the Schrödinger wave function. And these waves vibrate and then split apart with time. Steve Weinberg, winner of the Nobel Prize, compares it to the following. Think of radio. If you're inside your living room listening to BBC radio, that radio is tuned to one frequency. But in your living room, there are all frequencies. Radio Cuba, Radio Moscow, the top 40 rock stations. All these radio frequencies are vibrating inside your living room, but your radio is only tuned to one frequency. Now, in other words, when two universes are in phase, they are coherent, and you can move back and forth. But as time starts to evolve, these two universes decouple. They start to vibrate at different frequencies. They can no longer interfere with each other. So why is it that your radio cannot listen to Radio Moscow? Why isn't it possible for your radio to listen to all frequencies? Because your radio is decoherent. It is no longer vibrating in unison with these other frequencies. And the same thing in quantum physics. We consist of atoms. Our atoms vibrate, but they no longer vibrate in unison with these other universes. We have decoupled from them. We have decohered from them. So in other words, deja vu is probably simply a fragment of our brain eliciting memories and fragments of previous situations. However, in quantum physics, there really are, in some sense, parallel universes surrounding us. The problem is we can't enter them because we have decohered from them. We're no longer vibrating in unison with them. Sorry about that.
All right. Let me just check something real quick with Steve here. Good? No? All right. Hold on. Technical issue.
Speaking of frequencies, my my battery packs here are not talking to each other. Testing. So when you're saying
Sorry about that, technical difficulty. So as Michio Kaku says, we're all vibrating, but we're just at different frequencies. Because if I was vibrating the same frequency as this table, I'd probably be a man table or something like that. It wouldn't be very pretty, let me just tell you. I mean, you guys have seen the movie The Fly, the original one, right? Yeah? That was like in the early experiments, they were trying to do this teleportation and like and then he teleports, but then he gets the fly in there, and then he mixes the frequencies, and he's got like fly DNA, and it's just not a pretty thing later down the road. But it's a cool sort of concept, and hearing Michio Kaku talk about vibrational frequencies, it's not that off to think that that kind of thing would happen. Like if you're mixing tables and men, and you get men table. And where we're going with this is about time, like as Michio Kaku said. So he mentioned deja vu, which we'll get into a little bit later, but he also mentioned over time things decouple, and what does that create? Space-time, right? You can't have space without time, and you can't have time without space. We all heard that from Einstein, right? And they're intertwined, and that's just how it works. They're all one and the same. Space and time is one and the same. So how many of you guys know which dimension we're in right now? I hear 3, someone said 3rd dimension, right? We hear that often, right? Which dimension do you think we're in? Technically 3rd. Actually, we're technically 4th. Because we have space-time. It's no longer space and it's no longer time, it's space-time. You can't use one without the other. Because how? Because we measure the distance. So from here to me, this is a distance, but it's spatial, and it's also how long does it take me to get to you. That's how we measure space. That's how we measure time, through this idea of the distance and the time it takes from one place to another. And they're completely intertwined, as Einstein said. Einstein also said the distinction between the past, present, and future is only a subordinately persistent illusion. So, the future, does it exist? Does it? Does the past, does it exist? all in the same spectrum. So if it's all in the same spectrum, is it technically the future? So, the movie like Arrival, yes, that was a great movie. See how science fiction can actually help us learn what's true, even though there's possibly octopod, or what are they, hectopod? Heptapod. Yes, ETs out there. But no, you're correct. So you actually answered your what you just said. You sort of debunked yourself by saying it's all here now. The future is a concept in the now moment. The past is a concept in the now moment. The only thing that exists is right now. Can we measure the future? No. Can we measure the past? Kind of. We can measure right now what we think happened in the past to create the illusion of something happening in the past, but actually, we're actually measuring it in the now moment, so all that truly exists is now. And we can wrap your head around this. We'll get to you in a minute, brother. You've got some space energy going, and we're going to have some deep conversations at the end of this panel, trust me. All right. So Neil deGrasse Tyson, another guy who we love to watch on TV that makes things really easy to understand, right? All right, here he goes about dimensions and time.
We have three dimensions that we're familiar with. On a grid, you might think of it as what street in New York, what street, what avenue, and what floor in a building that you might meet someone. These are three coordinates that you would give. Remember, however, that anytime you've ever made an appointment to see someone, yes, you are. Yes, you are. You would not give a time without a place, nor would you give a place without a time. So the actual coordinates to meet someone require four numbers, basically, four coordinates. 3 space coordinates and 1 time coordinate. You never said to your friend, I'll meet you at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Where? You never said, I'll meet you at the corner of 33rd and 3rd. When? We know intuitively that we need a space and a time coordinate combined in order to have life unfold in any meaningful way. So the idea that we live in 4 dimensions should not be surprising to people. We take it for granted. But the difference is that we are not prisoners of our 3-dimensional space. I can walk left and right, I can jump up and down, I can walk forwards and backwards, and I can repeat that. I can access all points of my 3-dimensional space, yet I am a prisoner in the present, forever transitioning from the past into the future. I have no access to the past. I have no access to the future. And so, if you go to a higher dimension, it's not unrealistic to think that you step out of the time dimension, and now you look at time as though we look at space. So very questions that we have, very statements that we make about our lives make no sense in that higher coordinate system. You can ask, when was I born? Well, you're always born. When did I go to college? You're always going to college. When did I die? You're always dying. And so, if your whole timeline is laid out in front of you, then you have access to it. And you can jump in at any point, relive it. We don't know yet if you can interfere with events that, quote, have already happened. If your whole timeline is just already there, what does it mean to jump into it and then change something if it's already there? So these are fascinating questions that make great fodder for science.
For science fiction. So, this is what people think of time. From the left, going to the right, the past, the future. And this is sort of what time actually is. It's a bunch of Fibonacci sequences spinned up in a bundle. And sort of like what Neil deGrasse Tyson just said, if we had the ability to go at any point in our life, not just now, but we could break this now barrier, then all of a sudden we're going into the 5th dimension. We're now perceiving things, and we're starting to do that when we are talking about multiverses, more than one version of ourselves, other timelines. This is a common theme in big science fiction movies, especially one of the biggest movies in the theater right now. So we're starting to crack open what our understanding of what reality is, we've been doing this for a long time in the scientific community, but now that it's sort of finally getting to the mainstream through vehicles of science fiction. And thank God for science fiction, because now we get to open our minds a little bit. And we've had some good science fiction shows over the years, but really right now it seems to be the mainstream. I have had some visions of what time is, and I'm going to jump ahead. And I've seen things like this in meditations. Kind of looks like Doctor Strange, right? A little bit, right? There's more truth in that movie than you can even imagine. This is probably my most accurate rendition of what time is and how it works. In the sense of that these are tiny fractalized Fibonacci sequences. It looks like a piece of that, white broccoli, if you've seen that kind of. Or not broccoli, the cauliflower, have you seen that one? The crazy Fibonacci sequences in that? But in a way, if you think about how time spirals up or down in cycles through the Fibonacci, and they intersect, going back to this guy, when we go into this a little bit deeper, and we start thinking about time travel and nodes in time, where we can actually intersect and things meet. And this is where Michio Kaku mentioned deja vu. What is deja vu but something that feels very like I've had this experience before, whether it's been in a dream or something, some familiarity, right? How many of you guys have deja vu? Almost every single one of us, right? Like you walk into a building and you're like, wait, I've been here before. But you know you've never been there before, right? Or you met somebody, like, that person's so familiar, but I've never met them. What's up with that? So, what these are other parallel, this is my interpretation of what these are, I'm just going to tell you my version. They are other parallel versions of you, or potential timelines that resonate, harmonize, because everything is a vibration and frequency, like music, and you are now resonating in a similar resonance as these other versions, these other songs, so to say, and then you can cross the streams a little bit. You start to connect to that other universe, that other version of you that is coexisting simultaneously, because time is an illusion, and there is no future, there is no past.
Your interpretation, would you say in that moment that you could possibly end up switching consciousness with your other self?
No. You can have the illusion that you're switching consciousnesses, but you are you. You are always you. This is the law of conservation, right? So you can never be destroyed, you can never go away. You exist. This is universal law number one. But Doctor Who did what? Okay. Go watch some Doctor Who and you'll know what I'm talking about, basically. Yes.
Are you referring to the Mandela effect?
We're going to get there.
Thank you.
It's coming up. But basically, you are you always. And this idea of even possession, from other beings, technically is not possible. We can give ourselves the illusion that we're being possessed or taken over, but we have to believe that that's what's happening in order for that to actually happen. So we exist. Law of conservation. Okay, so here's a little bit of information about the different dimensional realities, and it's my personal belief, but also many mainstream scientists, that we are actually moving into the fifth dimension. Our understanding of what the fourth is expanding. Now that we're talking about multiverses, different frequencies and vibrations, being able to teleport things, which we'll get into a little bit later, but we're actually now able to slightly peer into these other dimensional realities that gives us data that these other realms actually exist. And when it comes to science, we need provable, repeatable experiments over and over. This is the scientific method. This is why I'm a big fan of the scientific method, even though I'm talking about a bunch of woo-woo stuff all the time. But the scientific method works. So this is just some diagrams sort of talking about, just saying this linear thing that's going on and how we perceive things from the past and the future. But what if we start going outside of that? The orthogonal direction outside of our space-time linearity, right? This is this linear thing of the distance between here and Brian, and there's a distance that we can measure and everything else. But what if we created a wormhole and I could stick my hand through here and it doesn't have to
the
travel
fifth
that
dimension, by
distance?
virtue of being at right angles to all
Anyways,
the
let's hear about the
dimensions
fifth
that have
dimension.
come before, gives us a way to get to those other connections of the quantum world and ever its many worlds that might seem unimaginable from the viewpoint of someone who believes there's nothing more than 4D space-time. In 2007, a team of scientists at Oxford under the direction of David Deutsch published a new proof equating Everett's many worlds interpretation with the probabilistic outcomes at the quantum level and the parallel universes resulting from chance and choice. And New Scientist magazine declared this to be one of the top science news stories of the year. The analogy often used in string theory is to think of the fifth dimension as being like a garden hose stretched out on the ground. From a distance, the hose looks like a line. But up close, we can see that the walls of the hose are curled up on themselves. So that if an ant were to walk inside that hose, it could go from one end to the other, the straight line of the fourth dimension, but be moving in a second dimension as well as the first. What if a fly were to enter our hose? Unlike the ant, the fly would be able to travel not just in a second dimension, but a third. So if our hose were 4D space-time, the ant would be moving in the fifth dimension, and the fly would be moving in the sixth. You and I, it appears, are ants rather than flies.
As of now, I think we're turning into flies. You ever heard the analogy of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly? I think that's what humanity is happening right now. I mean, it may not seem like it if you look at our TV and all the political garbage and all that stuff, and you kind of like, whoa, things are going to hell in a handbasket. But, like what Elon Musk said, we're either going to figure out we're in a simulation and evolve past, or evolve it and create our own versions of these sims and whatnot, or we're going to kill ourselves and die and self-destruct. So it's one or the other, guys. Let's go ahead and start creating our own worlds, start creating our own virtual realities, and creating our own sims and simulations. Okay, we already went through the time thing. You guys have heard of relativity, right? E equals mc squared. It's like a big thing some guy made, and it's been with us for a few decades, maybe a century or so now, almost. And frames of reference. So we are all, in fact, we're in a multiverse right now. And how many people in this room estimated? Maybe 70, 50, something like that? There are an estimated 50 plus multiverses right now in this room. Each and every single one of you is actually your own universe, your own perspective on what reality is, right? Everything revolves around you and your world and how you see things and how you perceive things. And then when we interact with each other, then we get that point of view a little bit, and we implement that, and then our views grow, and then we have this expanding effect. But we are all, there's 7 billion plus multiverses on this planet, and that's just humans. That's not even until we get into plant life and animal life and all the other life that's out there and the undiscovered life. So it's a big multiverse out there. So to say there's a limited number of dimensions or universes, it's pretty limiting to put any kind of limit on that. And this is a great video that a Filipino elementary school girl put together and won a prize over to sort of help explain this concept. Super simple.
Exactly what number is this? She says it's 6. She says it's 9. So who's right? Actually, they're both right. They just saw it differently since they looked at it from different reference frames. Now, what exactly are reference frames? These are just a set of axes for locating space and a clock for measuring time, relative to which you make observations. I'll demonstrate. Once this car starts honking, all 3 observers will record its sound. But sound is a wave. Waves from a moving source, like the car, get bunched up in front and looser at the back. So for our case, those behind the car should hear the loose sound waves, a low pitch, while those in front should hear a high-pitched sound. When I analyzed their recordings, that was exactly what I found. So, what sound was the car really making?
A high-pitched sound? A medium-pitched sound? Or a low-pitched sound?
Well, it was really making all three pitches at the same time, each pitch relative to one observer. Then, what if we had infinitely many observers? Then the car would be making infinitely many sounds, each sound relative to one observer. And even if they all disagreed, no one observer is wrong. What each observes is what the sound is. Similarly, if I throw this ball close to the speed of light, its light waves would also get loosened and bunched up, making it appear as different colors. With infinitely many observers, the ball would appear to be all colors at the same time, each color relative to one observer. So sound and light are relative. Ever heard of time being relative? Consider a light clock with two mirrors and a photon bouncing between them. Every time the photon hits the bottom mirror, it's one tick of time. So when I start moving, I see it travel in vertical lines. But from your stationary frame, it travels in V's. So since the photon has to travel a longer distance and the speed of light is constant, each tick takes longer relative to you. So moving clocks run slower, and the faster you run, the slower your clock ticks. So in Olympic races, Usain Bolt is actually the best time traveler.
If he ran at 96.8% the speed of light and took 10 seconds to finish a race according to his clock,
a stationary judge would record 40 seconds, to which he would obviously object. But their argument would be pointless since time is relative. So the really mind-blowing idea here is that observers in different frames will perceive different versions of the same reality. And every observer's frame is equally valid. So before you start making any observational arguments with others, first imagine yourself observing through their reference frames.
So, with that said, the quote that you may, if you guys follow me on Twitter or Facebook, I always put this out there: all truths are true. Mind-blowing, right? Can you actually, you're like, well, no, this is not right, and that's right. Nope. We just found out that it's all relative. So every single one of us is perceiving the universe from our own lens, and it's right. We could argue and we could say, well, the scientific method says this, and we all agree. But actually, what is reality? Reality is a correct collective agreement of what actually is. And if somebody disagrees, and if they truly believe that, have you ever tried to convince somebody to believe something else that they really believe? It's like you cannot convince them of otherwise. And this term, this idea that all truths are true, is kind of true. And you could argue with me, but then I would be like, no, it is true. And then I would have my perception of reality, that all truths are true. And then, anyways, we all intersect with our truths, and this is what sort of connects our collective reality. And I know this is a big pill to swallow right now. We'll come back to it. Other aspects of this reality that we're discovering is it's a hologram. I mean, you guys have heard that reality is a hologram, is an illusion, right? We just talked about how time is an illusion, and we know that, and I just sort of proved it to you, because you can't go to the future and you can't go to the past, because all that exists is now. Even the future is now. The concept of the future is just a concept, but we can't physically experience it except for right now. The concept of the past is just the past. So if we're in a holograph, in a hologram, that's really the only way we could, a lot of what I'm saying up here, could experience things is if we were in an actual hologram. What is a hologram? Let's get into that a little bit. Most people just think, oh, well, if it's a hologram, it's not real. Not necessarily. I'm not trying to invalidate this reality. In fact, I just said all truths are true. Every single one of your visual concepts and perceptions of reality is actually true. So let's see what a hologram is.
See and experience everything we call our familiar three-dimensional reality may be a projection of information that's stored on a thin, distant, two-dimensional surface. Sort of the way the information for this hologram is stored on this thin piece of plastic.
Is the three-dimensional world an illusion in the same sense that a hologram is an illusion? Perhaps. I'm inclined to think yes, that the three-dimensional world is a kind of illusion, and that the ultimate precise reality is the two-dimensional reality at the surface of the universe.
When we look at some of the modern scientific views of reality that have tried to get down to the nitty-gritty, we see that at its ultimate level, say in M theory or string theory, that reality is not solid, it's mostly empty space, and whatever solidity it has seems more to resemble a hologram picture rather than material, harsh, solid reality.
So, how many guys have seen back in the 80s or maybe early 90s those dinosaur pictures that are just like two-dimensional, like fuzz or static stuff that don't really have anything, but you cross your eyes, and then all of a sudden the dinosaurs pop out, right? And they're 3D, and it's like, whoa! And it was like a big thing back in the 90s. Everywhere you went, there's museums of all these things and stuff. So this is sort of the idea that, again, phasing into reality. So everything, all the information, and what these scientists were talking about, that all information exists. Michio Kaku said this earlier. Everything exists at a specific frequency or phase, which is almost in a two-dimensional reality. And for us to observe it, to phase into the right frequency to match what it is by adjusting our eyes or tuning into the right channel. For example, as Michio Kaku said, for TV, all these different channels exist. We just have to switch the channel so we can tune into that frequency, to that program. That's kind of what this idea of the hologram and how it works. All the information is there, we just have to tune into it. Let's see what we got here. Okay, another Einstein quote. He's a pretty smart dude. I love putting his quotes up here. Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. So, yes, we might be in a hologram. Yes, this might be an illusion, but man, it feels real. Every day, these emotions I'm feeling, these interactions I'm having with you guys up here, you guys are watching this and being like, what is he talking about? I don't know, it's mind-blowing, but I'm feeling something, I don't know. Like, there's something to this more than just me saying it's an illusion, forget about it, go home and go to sleep and don't wake up. But we keep waking up. What's the persistent thing that Einstein's talking about? How many of you guys know about the double slit experiment? Okay. So this is something that they should be teaching in kindergarten. It is the most done experiment. I'm just going to talk over here. The most done experiment in the world, repeated over and over and over again. It's also sort of called the observer effect, where they took small electrons through an electron gun, and they shot them through these two slits. And when they looked at it, the interference pattern in the background came out to be actually two slits. But when they turned away and they sort of stepped away from the experiment, actually it was the reverse. They actually shot them out, and then they created this interference pattern of waves, as if these electrons acted as a wave instead of actual particles. Then they went in to go and measure to see what was the mechanism that actually made this interference pattern. And then when they measured it, it came out in just two slits. So the idea is the observer effect collapses the wave function of reality into matter, and what we see here and now. So let me see if I can make this a little bit easier to understand. So what we don't see kind of works as a wave. You know how we can't see radio waves and these kinds of things, and they're sort of bouncing off everything, and they're catching into our phones, and these things. If you ever drop the pebble in the pond and it sort of it spreads out in a wave formula, and you can see them, and then they cross-reference with another rock over there, and you see how those waves intersect. That's sort of how things work behind the veil, and we can't see them in this two-dimensional world, so to say. When we observe them, they snap into reality, and this is what we get. This is what we're seeing here right now. So, highly recommend doing a little research on the double slit experiment. With that said, the observer effect, if a tree falls down in the woods and there's nobody there to hear it, does it make a sound? Anyone want to guess? Does it make a sound?
It does and it doesn't.
That's the best answer I've heard all day, or ever in all this. It does and it doesn't. How, first of all, how does it make a sound? How can it make a sound? Right? So things, matter pushes against other matter and it creates sound waves which flow through space and time for people or birds or whatever to hear it. But if there's nobody there to hear it, does it really make a sound? It depends on the perspective. If there's nobody there, there has to be a receiver to hear the sound in order for the sound to actually exist. And that's where a lot of this what is reality thing is where it's going, is it's sort of a two-way pump, all of this. If all of you guys didn't exist here, I wouldn't be up on the stage talking, right? I would just be alone in my lonely universe and the void. So really, our reality is a co-creation, a collective reality of us bouncing off waves from each other, ideas, our perceptions of what reality is. And I'm feeding my reality into your reality, and you're feeding your reality into mine, and then it's merging into this video game simulation that we call life. It's so cool. So, how many of you guys are familiar with game engines and how they work? Real-time game engines. Oh, cool. A few people. Great. The difference between pre-rendered scenes and rendered scenes, right? This is, right now, the industry is all going into real-time rendered scenes, right? Scenes that sort of the computer machine, the Sony PlayStation, or the game engine that runs on the Sony PlayStation, for example, Unreal is a very popular one, or Cry engine, there's a lot of different things, like Unity, there's different ones out there. So they all render in real time. And what does that mean? And I'll show you a little video that helps explain it. But they're only rendering what is perceived by the viewer of the screen. And what does that do? That keeps things very light. That means the computer doesn't have to go in and spend a lot of energy in the far background or in the background graphics, the smaller objects and things in the back. Because we don't see them and we're not close to it, it doesn't need to spend a lot of computing power on that. So it's a very efficient way of giving the experience, the video game experience, to the user, to the guy who's just sort of going through. And it's my belief that our reality actually works like a real-time game engine. Let me show you.
As I switch this on, you see what's happening over in the right-hand view?
See how it's
Everything
disappearing?
that falls out of range of the left-hand camera is disappearing. It's because those objects are occluded.
So the actual view is on the left, and then what's actually happening in the game is on the right. So all these objects in the game just completely disappear because they're not being rendered, they're not needed. So it's only literally rendering what it needs in the moment, in real time, in the now, because that's all that exists. We don't need any of this other stuff because it's irrelevant. Very efficient. If we tried to render all of the past and all the future ideas that collectively we have, we'd be a really powerful computer. And this is just this is a tutorial from Unreal. I'll grab this off their website, but it showed you brilliantly how sort of things work in this reality with the sound bouncing off, frequencies hitting each other, co-creating this experience for us to enjoy. Because if they bounced off and didn't do the cymatics things that they do, harmonizing with the music, we just wouldn't have reality the way we would. So with this said, behind the veil, on the other side, what we can't see is infinite possibilities. In the game engine, it's programmed that we sort of have ideas and things like that. But if we can't see it, but we can imagine it, it probably exists. It's a potential reality. We just haven't brought it into this one yet. We haven't given it life. We haven't breathed the ideas. And this is why creativity and art and the arts of everything in our world is basically created from this. And this is, I'm not just saying art as we describe art, but architecture, building things, inspiration for inventions. This is all art. This is all what we do to birth into this reality so we can all share and enjoy it together. And these worlds exist. Oops. This is in the New York Post, 2011. The human brain sees the world in an 11-dimensional multiverse. These are just some articles I handpicked. Physicists extend quantum machine learning to infinite dimensions. How many of you guys have heard of quantum computing? It's kind of getting close to being a thing. And in fact, it is a thing, and there are scientists in universities. I'm about to show you a video that's from 2007. There are more, I can't count the number of actual universities now that actually have quantum computers. Do you know how regular computers work? They work on a binary system, ones and zeros, crunchy numbers, creating cool graphics. Everything is sort of in this reality, how we perceive it. That's the binary world. That's the linear world. That's the fourth dimension. We now are creating computers, quantum computers, that can go beyond this dimension in their computational powers. It's not a 1 and it's a 0, it's a 1 and a 0. And it's just a 1 and it's just a 0. And it's none of those either. These are and when you connect those, they kind of go infinite, and they create infinite blocks of ways of computations. But we're doing that in universities. Some people might be doing this in the garage, I don't know. The NSA is probably knocking on their door.
This quote is from a respectable scientist, in fact, one of the founders of this field, that may look a little strange to you who don't follow theoretical physics, but there is a very clear prediction, and whether you chose to come to this session or not. Quantum mechanics makes a very specific prediction that all of those are as real as the thing that you remember. And this is bizarre, because we don't see those other things. But science has reached the point now where we can build machines that exploit those other worlds. And quantum computers are perhaps the most exciting of all of these that we have within, or almost within our grasp right now. So people from a physics background love this. They want to understand the world. They want to understand the universe, how it all works. There's another type of person who tends to come from the computer science side that's like, yeah, okay, that's all great. But there's a different thing going on here, which is just as exciting, if not more, and that these machines that supposedly can do this wild stuff, let's forget about how they work, if you could build one, could solve problems that you could never, ever solve. With any made the most sophisticated...
There's many. So this is things are getting wild now. We have multiverses that we actually have provable ways to access through machines, right? This is not a bunch of woo-woo stuff. However, I'm going to make some connections to the woo-woo, but I mean, that's pretty woo-woo. Just think about it. We have machines that can go to other dimensions, make computations, get information, and bring them back into this reality, right? I know this sounds a little bit extreme for probably some of your hardcore physicists and everything else out there, the other guys out there, but that's basically what's happening when you think about it. So, time and space are modes by which we think and not conditions in which we live. Again, this is just repeating all of this, that all that exists is right now. The future doesn't exist, the past doesn't exist. This time-space illusion thing, it's really an illusion, and we need to really start understanding this. How many of you guys have heard of the Mandela effect? I know our buddy over here has. All right, so how many of you guys have actually looked into this? All right, do you understand the mechanisms and how it works? I just told you, actually, up until now, we just told you how the Mandela effect is actually real. And we can debate it and fight over a C-3PO's leg is gold or silver. Some of us think it was from the beginning, and some of us were like, what? What did he just say? How many guys, what color is C-3PO's leg? Silver. Has it always been silver? When did it start being silver? Or was it gold? How many people thought it was gold the whole time? Until I just mentioned that it's silver. How many people knew that it was silver from the beginning? Kind of 50-50, right? In our space-time now, C-3PO's leg is silver. It has always been silver. It's never been gold. Or, I mean, he had one silver leg, I should say. That's in the space-time now moment. If you look it up on the internet, that's what they'll tell you. The guy who plays C-3PO will make the same claims. Darth Vader, James Earl Jones, the famous line, "No, I am your father." Does he say, "No, I'm your father," or does he say, "Luke, I am your father"? Who remembers the line which way? How many for no? How many for Luke? More for Luke. In our space-time now, it's no. And if you go in any video and you look it up, even in all VHS tape, he says, no. He says, "No, I am your father." And we're like, wait, no, he said Luke. I know he said Luke. Right? Right? How could that be wrong? Even James Earl Jones has gone on the record and said, "I said Luke." Right? No, sir, you didn't. Not according to recorded history. How is that possible? Berenstein Bears. Did I say it right? Or is it Berenstein Bears? Curious George. Does he have a tail? Or does he not? I even forgot what it is right now. I'm like, wait, does he really? Which version are we in? Which reality are we in right now? How many guys think he has a tail? He had a tail at some point, and then he lost it. He never had a tail. Okay, I don't know that one. The Volkswagen symbol, is it the one on the left or the one on the right? What's happening here? All minds are melting and being blown. Life is like a box of chocolates. Life is like a box of chocolates. What did he say? Life, he doesn't say that actually. He says, life was like a box of chocolates. I think that's what he says in the version now. We have all these things. Look up Mandela Effect. It's happening all the time right now. And what is happening? Our collective remembering of the past is shifting. What does that mean? Does that mean the past that we remember is fake, is wrong? No. Because we just proved that every single one of our perceptions of reality is a valid truth. But maybe we're shifting timelines collectively. And maybe some of us are from one of the timelines, some of the now versions of us, and some of the now versions of us are from another timeline. And if I had a board here, I could go really into detail about showing you how time intersects and how we create time. But if you think of, again, going back to the idea of vibrational frequencies, so to give you some context on how this is even possible, which I just did in the earlier presentation, but in the presentation up until now. But we are shifting 1,000 billion times every second to every second, renewing ourselves in frequency, in vibration. All of us in this room collectively, with each and every single vibrational frequency that you carry, mixed in with me, are creating a very unique space-time now signature in the all that there is, of all possibilities. And you take any component out of that, and that no longer becomes what is now. So, let me think how to explain this without my drawings. I'm like, oh, I'm so used to having my drawings. So right now, here's a great example, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later tomorrow as well. How many of you guys have heard of remote viewing? Some of you, it's been sort of in the movies and it's kind of coming out there. There was actual remote viewing military projects in the 60s that went on for almost a decade. They said they stopped them, but they're still going on. And what remote viewing is, it's kind of like psychic warfare. What they train, how many guys have heard of the movie Men Who Stare at Goats? Or seen that movie, right? So that was loosely based on some of these programs. They sort of made it comical. And they were trying to kill this goat. And I don't know if they actually really tried to do that or not. Maybe some people try to do that, I don't know. But the more important part of that program, they were using it to spy on the Russians, the Cold War. And they got a bunch of soldiers, and they handpicked and selected the ones that had a little more of ability than the other ones. But basically, everybody can do this. I've done remote viewing. It works. It's pretty accurate. About 80%. That's about the statistics on remote viewing. And you actually are given a target, so to say. This is how it works. They give you a number. They don't tell you what it is. And in that number, they assign a target to a specific event or a place or something, like if they're trying to spy on a secret nuke base in Russia being built. They kind of have an idea there's a secret nuke base in Russia, and let's assign a target to it. They give the target number, which has no information to the remote viewer, and then the remote viewer then gets the number and then starts doing the work. And through a sequence of sort of psychic premonitions, you start drawing pictures and doing a bunch of stuff, and then you correlate that with a bunch of other soldiers who are doing the same work. And what happens is you collectively start to have a picture, informing the picture of the target. And they did this, they called them the SRI projects, look this up. A lot of this has been declassified, and a lot of the remote viewing, the top guys are actually out there teaching remote viewing. So this basically shows us that we can break this sort of space through our consciousness. We can actually break this space-time barrier, piercing through the veil, so to say, without having to physically go there and sort of peer into and sort of do a Doctor Strange, right? So I know this is becoming a long thing, but basically in the 60s, the government started asking these remote viewers to peer into the future. Let's go into the future. Maybe we can win the lottery, or maybe we can see what's going to happen. Is a thermonuclear war going to happen? Maybe we can take precautions to stop it. So they started getting these remote viewers together, and they started peering into the future, and everybody saw disasters. Everybody saw the thermonuclear war. Scared crap out of governments, big governments around the world. So what did they do? They started building their underground bunkers, getting ready. Here it comes, the end of the world. We don't know exactly how, but all these remote viewers saw a lot of nasty stuff. So let's start building our bunkers and get ready to hunker down for World War III. It's coming. So over the decades, we're getting ready for it, but it's not here yet. How come these remote viewers, what they said, that it was so accurate, they were accurate in everything else. They found those nuke bases in Russia, they found the secret documents like hidden beyond in the center of the earth. They found aliens out in outer space, so that's a whole other thing we'll get to later. But how come how come we're not in World War III and we haven't wiped ourselves off the planet? Well, the vibrational frequency at which they were, when they did the remote viewing, they could only see and match the frequency of which they are. So they saw a future that was tied into the frequency of what they were at the time. And because we're changing in every second and every moment, we're constantly redeveloping ourselves, shifting our frequency, shifting our space-time now, shifting who we are. This is why it's so hard to get an accurate prediction when you go to the psychic people. It's, hey, tell me my future. Well, that didn't happen. But some of it did, kind of. They were kind of right. But in reality, the probabilities to tell the future is pretty impossible. It's infinite, the number of probabilities from every second. Even right now, just the probabilities of going out the door and having something happen, it's very hard to predict. So psychics, what they're tuning into as a receiver of information is the highest likely probability of the signature frequency that you're generating right now. Because what psychics really do is they're just reading your frequency. They're reading your energy. And they can feel that and then generate an image from what you're projecting, as we are all projecting things. And tomorrow I'll get really into the whole projection thing. A little tangent there, but basically what's happening here is we have these different past. The past is shifting with our future. It is not set. The past is just as valuable as our future is. Infinite future, infinite past. And it's only the past is going to match with the present vibrational frequency that we are now. Just like remote viewers went into the future and got a different view, they go into the past and they're going to get a different view. And that's what we're starting to see with the Mandela effect. We're starting to see a different version of our past because that's what syncs up with who we are right now. And this goes into a whole bunch of esoteric, deep things that we can do to heal our past simply with your mind and shift how events and things happened and how you perceive them. These are the cheat codes, guys. I'm giving you little nuggets of cheat codes. Okay, quick review. First, everybody take a deep breath. That was a lot of information. Oh, what is this guy talking about? It's crazy talk. It's crazy talk, but it kind of makes a little sense because I know C-3PO's leg was gold. I know it in my core. All right. Everything in existence is a vibrational frequency. We kind of covered that a lot, right? In the beginning. Math, geometry is the common language of the known universe, right? Everything has this Fibonacci sequence. You can sort of get geometry. What is geometry, right? It's math. Geometry is formed from sound vibration. We live in a simulation, a hologram of a 2D projection that's snapping into this reality from our observations of it. What we perceive is what we get. What you believe is what you see, not what you see is what you believe. In fact, that's how it really works. Time as we know it is an illusion, which we covered over and over again. And multi-dimensions are real, provable through quantum computing. Whether or not you believe the psychic down the street that's tapping into something else or not, it doesn't matter. You can simply understand through quantum computing. It's provable, it's a fact. These multi-dimensional realities exist. We are getting information and we're bringing it back. And if you've ever played with an Ouija board, you know something's up with that. These multi-dimensional realities, other things from the other side are coming through. Okay, another wonderful Tesla quote. The day science begins to study the non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. Guess what we're doing now, guys? We are studying non-physical phenomena. Did you guys hear the announcement 2 weeks ago? What did the Navy come out and say? UFOs exist. The Navy said UFOs exist. And guess what? We're going to study them. In fact, we've been studying them. The Navy released the secret ATIC program that was funded in secret by Congress. Has been going on since 2004, 7-ish, I don't know. There's a ton of programs that have been studying this phenomenon. The fact that we can actually talk about this now is a big deal. I'll repeat it. The Navy said UFOs exist, and you can go and look on your iPhones and everything after this panel and see, if you haven't seen, if you've been living in a tunnel, you'll see that this is happening. So we are and have been studying the non-physical phenomenon, but it's just now reaching the masses. Okay? So these are just some more articles that I'm putting out. Researchers have linked the human brain to the internet. These are just things that this is the reality we're in now with the development of technology happening at an exponential rate, and the study of these non-physical phenomena peering into these other dimensions. We're on hyperdrive for what's about to come through the pipe. And again, if you only watch the political news and pay attention to that nonsense, you're missing a big thing, a big shift. The biggest shift in human history is happening right now. Literally. Nothing like this has ever happened. These are just more articles. Physics create a fluid with negative mass. Yes, you push, it pulls, it's crazy. What do you call it? The Star Trek, not the hologram, not the holodeck, but the replicator. We actually have the means, the beginnings of a replicator. With just electricity and carbon, we can start to make food. And once we understand the frequency vibration in more detail of how that food can come together, then we can imagine this. Imagine Grandma makes an apple pie. It's her special ingredients, it's her special type of, all that love and work goes into it. But what if we had a 3D scanner that could scan not just the surface of the pie, but all the molecular structure and everything that went into that pie to very detail. And then we had that data. And then we had some way to 3D print or project that data next door. Boom, replicator. And we're getting very close to that. Very, very close to having a full-on replicator, Star Trek, in this now reality. So we kind of covered, or no, we didn't cover this. What is possible now? Time travel, teleportation, anti-gravity, telekinesis, the beginnings of telekinesis. It's actually happening. Aliens, we just said that. Aliens exist, come on, the Navy's already come out and said it. And they've released videos to show some of the gun camera footage, and there's pilots that have gone on the record, and this is just like out there in the ethers, not to mention in 2013, the 40 witnesses that I mentioned earlier that I got together in front of 6 former members of Congress. By the way, all 6 former members of Congress wrote a letter to Obama at the time. They wrote a letter to the UN. They were absolutely convinced, based on the 40 hours of testimony and evidence presented, that ETs do exist and that humans are being engaged. It made the back page of the New York Times at the time. Now we have the front page. Time travel. There's a little bit about what scientists have done with time travel.
Scientists from Australia have proven that at a subatomic level, future events affect the past. They shot helium atoms at a sensor and then randomly inserted a grate into where the helium atoms had just been. When they checked the data, they found that the helium atoms reacted as though they passed through the grate, even though the grate had been placed after.
How many guys have heard of time crystals? Brian over here has. What's your name, gentlemen? Chris? Brian and Chris. So, time crystals, a couple years ago, a new state of matter created that is unlike anything we've ever seen. And these were both, 2 different universities created them at the same time through different means, but basically they're the same thing. Here's an explanation.
Hey there, Time Bandits, it's Trace for D-News. Physicists have created a new form of matter called time crystals. No, not the time crystals that you may have seen on Rick and Morty. These time crystals have properties we have never before seen in other matter. Usually, matter is motionless at its resting state and only has potential energy until kinetic energy is introduced to it. For example, a ball at rest is chock full of potential energy. And when it's kicked, that energy is converted to kinetic energy, the energy of motion. But time crystals actually move at their resting state or ground state, and that's when atoms have the lowest amount of energy. They're like a ball that is forever in motion. In other words, they are always unstable, down to the atomic level. They are the first non-equilibrium matter ever created. Regular crystals are an arrangement of atoms in repeated 3-dimensional patterns called a lattice. The patterns are duplicated through space, whereas time crystals duplicate their patterns through space and time. Researchers have also remarked that their creation of time crystals is evidence that time symmetry can be broken and that non-equilibrium matter can exist.
So it's kind of like a 5th-dimensional thing, right? Not bound by the confines of our linear perspective and views of time. But it's actual matter. And it's just basic stuff right now, but as time progresses, we can develop these things and have some really awesome inventions. All right, so teleportation. Researchers teleported a particle of light 6 kilometers. This was in 2016. Now there's different things out there that would say, no, they didn't. This is an ongoing sort of discussion, whether they did this or not, and more research and more science is going into this. But you guys can look this up, and there's other experiments going on in that field. Anti-gravity, acoustic levitation, which is a form of anti-gravity. Using sound, again, to sound resonance. Basically, there are 2 speakers being pushed at each other to then take droplets of water and suspend them, and this is the objects are getting larger and larger for what they're able to levitate using sound. So there's another gentleman named John Hutchinson who has been doing this sort of vibrational sound levitating stuff for many, many years. He actually became under some scientific scrutiny, and also military people raided his labs, and he had some nasty stuff happen to him, and he's sort of like driving around on a hippie bus right now, doing his work, low cognito. He's actually creating sound frequencies to counteract radiation from Fukushima. But here's some interesting video from some of the experiments he was doing back in like the 80s. He had labs in Vancouver, and all the time the neighbors were complaining because all kinds of weird anomalies and things would be going on. But he was very much a pioneer at his time, and he sort of, unfortunately, has fallen off the map now, but probably for his sake. And you see things like, later you'll see in this metal literally starts melting like ice cream. And a butter knife gets embedded in the metal. Look carefully. This is old footage from the 80s, so it's hard to see. This is a metal piece just melting in half. A cannonball is actually levitated and floated. Look at this butter knife getting melted into a big slab of other metal. This is just beaming sound vibration frequencies into these things. So the energy implications for sound vibration is off the charts. And a lot of the reason why this type of technology has been suppressed or kept away from the mainstream is because when properly harnessed, we could start building UFOs and floating off into space. But right now, John Hutchinson is just doing, like I said, he's using sound vibrational frequencies and other means that doesn't get him in trouble. We'll have the NSA knocking on your door. And when I say that, I'm not joking. I've talked to many scientists who have had the NSA knock on their door. Telekinesis. So famous scientist William Teller, who's actually part of the To the Stars Academy, that's part of this group that's helping with disclosure, working with the military to bring out UFOs. He's a former Lockheed scientist who has worked on some pretty interesting things that he can't even talk about. But he has this great quote. For the last 400 years, an unstandard assumption of science is that human intention cannot affect what we call physical reality. Our experimental research of the past decade shows that, under the right conditions, this assumption is no longer correct. We humans are much more than we think we are, and psychogeneric science continues to expand the proof of it. So this is a guy who works for Lockheed, had worked for Lockheed, he no longer does, but he is, I've heard rumors he's been reverse engineering some extra dimensional craft of sorts, and he's making this claim that we, as the observer effect proves, have mind over matter. Here's a little video from Dean Reuben, who runs the Institute of Noetic Sciences out of Northern California, and he And the Institute of Noetic Sciences was founded by Edgar Mitchell, astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who also was at the citizen hearing that I produced and was talking to the Congress members about UFOs and the existence of them.
So many of you may be aware that for many years, people have been using electronic random number generators where the numbers, the basis of the randomness are quantum phenomena, either radioactive decay times or electron tunneling or other phenomena. Like the one in the upper right there is using photons that hit a mirror, a half-silvered mirror, and either go straight through or bounce off to the side, which is a quantum random effect. So people have been using these things for almost over 50 years now. To give an example, 1985, Bob, John, and Brenda Dunn at Princeton University did an experiment with a random number generator where they asked people to aim high, meaning make the generator produce more ones, or lay low, more zeros, or do nothing as a baseline. And they report highly significant results. And what was the reaction to that? Not good enough. And it's the same suspicion you always get, that it's one laboratory producing a result that is kind of outside the mainstream, so people are suspicious. So a couple years later, Roger Nelson and I, when we were both at Princeton, decided to see, is it really true there's just one lab showing these results? Well, it turns out, over a period of about 30 years, that there wasn't just one lab. There were 68 different investigators reporting this in 152 publications, not just one experiment, but almost 600 and 200 controls. And you look at the overall results on the controls, you get something that's very close to chance in terms of the mean shift. And in terms of the experimental data, almost a 7 sigma result. So there's replications. The same kind of analysis was done again in 2006, bringing it up to date, but only looking at a subset of about half of the studies that have been done using random number generators. And again,
So just to sort of fill in, so these experiments were made using random generators where humans had a specific intention of the outcome, and it showed these computers actually were able to produce results based on the intentions of the people sort of having the intentions to make them go a different way. So they had mind over matter in a sense. And these studies have been done over and over and over again, but the mainstream scientific community was sort of shunning these results. And this is just Dean Ray sort of explaining like all of this stuff that
and I've heard explicitly
that's been
people
going
saying,
on for a
if
long
this is
time.
true,
These mind over matter experiments have been going
can't throw
for
away the textbooks
decades,
because we know too much
but the
already.
mainstream,
That is probably
again,
correct, but in each
is just not
discipline in
willing to
science.
look at it.
So what do we do with this? I'm going to present the world's fastest analysis of what's happening here. So reductive materialism is predicated on a model that looks something like this. Physics is at the bottom, chemistry, biology, psychology, consciousness is somewhere near the top, but consciousness doesn't mean anything. And from this perspective, the idea that mind and matter directly interact with each other in some way is forbidden. Or at least it's very difficult to think of a way that it could work. Now, Stuart Hemmerich has come up with an interesting model, and there are more and more models coming along that suggest that there may be a way to stick within the existing scientific paradigm and solve this problem. But the other approach, of course, is to take exactly the same disciplinary structure, but just take consciousness and stick it down there. So it's a new metaphysical base on which we sit. From this perspective, just like in physics where you have electrons that go everywhere up in the pyramid, here we'd have consciousness that starts at the bottom and goes everywhere up. So this is idealism, panpsychism, neutral modism, use whatever your favorite term is. From this perspective, the real puzzle is how do we get from consciousness or awareness into physics? Because if you solve that problem, and there are people working on that too, well then all the rest of it is perfectly fine. And we don't need to throw any textbooks away, except we're going to throw them away every 2 or 3 years anyway, because that's what happens.
So basically, a big key component to a lot of this information that I'm talking about, as well as scientists in the mainstream are discovering that we need to start introducing consciousness into the equation. It's something that scientists have tried to stay away from for a long time. What is consciousness? What is consciousness? Like that's a big question. But essentially, the awareness factor that there's something going on, that something is aware of, conscious, like this table. How is this table a table? There's some sort of consciousness, AI perhaps, another way to say it, that's keeping this table a table. I don't know if I'm keeping it a table. If I go over there, does the table exist? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But somehow I come back and we all come back to this room and this table is here. So what keeps this intact? Consciousness. And there's a lot of, again, panpsychiatryism. There's a lot of different terms and different mainstream scientists that are like finally just thrown in town. Like, this is the only thing we can think of to explain how all this reality stuff works. Adam Curry, he's developing an app called the Entangled app. It's still in its beta phase, but it's actually an app that registers thought interaction with the phone. And this is a tangible, registerable way of thought-computer interaction, and it's creating provable results. So I would look into that. And I'm going to just skip that. This is another thing, have you guys have ever talked to your plants and see them grow better? There's been experiments doing that, playing music to plants. And there's other people that'll say, well, that's been debunked and that's that and this or that. But there's more experiments that say, yes, if you talk to your plants, if you put intention into something, it's going to grow faster, better, compared to the other plant sitting in the room that doesn't get any attention. And we know this with children, right? And we just know that if we give them attention and we love them, then they're going to sprout to be beautiful beings. And if we put them in the corner and ignore them, you might get a monster. So you don't need a plant to prove that to you. Aliens. My favorite subject. If you follow me on Facebook or Twitter. I go deep into the subject. This has been my red pill, so to say. This is what's made me question all of reality and start doing the research and study into this whole presentation, which I'm giving you. So aliens is a big factor. Again, do we all have to believe in aliens to exist? Not really. But in my reality, what I've experienced, they exist. And from those experiences, I've been able to go down this rabbit hole and make a cool presentation and get awards at UFO conventions and have this amazing interaction. Yes, I have interacted with alien beings. I'll say it. Nothing to hide there. Can I prove it? No. Sorry, not right now. Not until you all believe. Drink the Kool-Aid. No, just kidding. There's no Kool-Aid drinking. No, I personally, just to say, out of my personal experiences, and not saying that you have to believe it, you can put whatever judgment on it you want. It's nice not to judge things. But I've interacted with beings telepathically. And I was downloaded information. That's the only way I can explain how I obtained certain information, was from telepathic communication from an alien being. That's all. It's the only way I can, maybe there was some other mechanisms involved that I don't understand yet. I'm sure that's coming, but it happened. And then I was able to verify that information through other people who also received the same messages. So this is where it gets really woo-woo, right? And then I'm like, well, how did that work? I want to know the mechanisms. And then that's what I just presented to you, the frequency, vibration, the energy signatures of being able to have this interaction. We don't have to go quite so far there yet. Let's just get the talk going back to our Navy releasing their thing, the New York Times doing this great article on December 16th, 2017. This was I think it was a front page article talking about the Defense Department's research into this subject matter, spending $20 million, which is nothing compared to what they spent on other things. But this is just one specific program. Big money has been spent in other ways that we don't know. If anybody looks into the black budget programs that are in the trillions, but we're not allowed to know what they are, well, much of those trillions go into research and development and finding of these special access programs, which you can go see documentaries on that stuff. We don't have to go into that. Here's just this is actually a few months old.
going a little bit into the ATIP program, but this is before the Navy did their official announcement.
Some key documents relating to a UFO inquiry. Now, thousands of researchers have filed requests via the Freedom of Information Act trying to get them, but they were denied.
And the main contractor for the Pentagon's secret study was a Las Vegas company. George Knapp has this exclusive story.
Pentagon's release last December of this 2004 encounter between pilots from the USS Nimitz and a mystery machine dubbed the Tic Tac UFO generated huge headlines and demands for more releases. 2 more followed, the gimbal video from 2015 and another nicknamed Go Fast. As many as 24 more videos are still in the Pentagon vaults, according to the man who ran the military's secret UFO study for years.
Can finally take this issue seriously without worrying about their political survival, right? Allowing Congress to have a conversation, either in an open or a closed session, saying, all right, guys, gals, what do we do about this?
What we can talk about now is, should this scientific study continue that has already been started? It's huge, I mean, volumes and volumes of stuff. We now have a basis for doing it.
Former Senator Harry Reid instigated the Pentagon study back in 2007 but kept it secret. Since his role was revealed last year, he's had many calls from others in Congress and believes there have likely been classified briefings involving military eyewitnesses. Reid fought hard to keep ATIP going, as revealed in this 2009 letter obtained by the I-Team. He also wants the study to be made public. The Pentagon has yet to release any files, but some information is dribbling out.
You've got these advanced aerospace vehicles flying around that we don't know where they come from, who's driving them, what the intent is, possibly off-world even.
In June, physicist Hal Puthoff made the first public presentation about the UFO study. Puthoff was the chief scientist for BASS, the Las Vegas company which won a Pentagon contract to study UFOs and related mysteries. In his presentation, Puthoff listed the subjects explored in dozens of scientific studies initiated by BASS. Star Trek-worthy topics, warp drive, invisibility, metamaterials, but the titles and authors have not been released until now. Here's the list, made public for the first time. Subjects include wormholes, anti-gravity, how to track hypersonic vehicles, and many others. Puthoff says his group has studied unknown materials recovered from crash sites. Make of that what you will. Elizondo says TTSA is actively looking for unusual materials so they can be analyzed.
You don't know at the time. You know, you pick up a piece of, or have delivered to you a piece of metallic, you know, slag that frankly could be, it could be to a vehicle that we've never seen before, or it could be part of an alternator to a 1984 Cadillac. You just don't know. So we have to be very careful.
Elizondo doesn't know if more UFO videos will ever be released, but says there's big news coming about the ones already made public. The gimbal video, for instance. He points out that the pilots didn't encounter just one UFO.
There's a whole fleet of them. What can they say?
George Knapp, 8 News Now.
We are posting key documents on the KLAS website, including that 2009 letter written by Senator Harry Reid, as well as the list of the science papers.
So how many of you guys know, here there's materials been recovered. And in the New York Times, they talked about materials being recovered and kept in a Las Vegas warehouse. There's a Las Vegas warehouse with this symbol on it, run by Bigelow Aerospace. Bob Bigelow, former...
Do you believe in aliens?
Sorry, former hotel tycoon, excuse me. Thank you. So Bob Bigelow is a very wealthy guy. He owned a place called Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know if you guys have heard that, looked into that. There's a documentary, my good buddy Jeremy Corbell did some research, investigative research, got a lot of the NIST files. NIST is the scientific group that he hired to basically set up shop on this ranch out in the middle of the Utah basin and study materials, study strange effects. And they go into it in the documentary, but here's Bob Bigelow being interviewed on 60 Minutes. Why does he have this symbol? Why is this his logo of his aerospace company?
Do you believe in aliens?
I'm absolutely convinced. That's all there is to it.
Do you also believe that UFOs have come to Earth?
There has been and is an existing presence, an ET presence. And I spent millions and millions. I probably spent more as an individual than anybody else in the United States has ever spent on this subject.
Is it risky for you to say, in public that you believe in UFOs and aliens?
I don't care.
You don't worry that some people will say, did you hear that guy? He sounds like he's crazy.
I don't care.
Why not?
It's not going to make a difference. It's not going to change reality of what I know.
Do you imagine that in our space travels we will encounter other forms of intelligent life?
You don't have to go anywhere.
You can find it here.
Yeah.
Where exactly?
It's just like right under people's noses. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Well, if you have a guy like that saying they're already here, you have a guy like me up on the stage saying I'm getting telepathic communications from ETs. Well, you get the Navy saying that that ETs are real, they're investigating them. Well, at what point? Well, maybe a NASA scientist might be good. Let's get a NASA scientist's view of this.
So what I found really helpful to me, and it's been helpful all along, that I've synchronously, and all of you will know what I mean by that, I have met individuals that have helped me with the scientific side of validating this reality. And one of them was Dr. Rudy Shield. I mean, this is a beautiful gentleman that I met in Newport a few years ago. And because I was doing a documentary that some of you might have seen, My Mum Talks to Aliens, he actually did this statement for me. I've got the audio statement, but I'm going to read it to you because he's one of the gentlemen that actually has no problem whatsoever, even though his credentials are what they are. For example, he's in astrophysical research at Harvard University, and he's actually wanting to make a statement, he says, to my research about the nature of the universe, what the UFO phenomena is now contributing to our overall knowledge of the structure of the universe. And he says, I've studied the subject for over 15 years. We now understand that the speed of thought far exceeds the speed of light, and we live in a quantum universe in which the quantum effect resides in the dark energy field. This quantum universe supports information transfer from mind to mind, the exchange of quantum holograms, and proceeding at the speed of thought allows for what society calls miracles, such as telepathy, past life experiences, remote viewing, crop circles, all the things that science hates to deal with. UFOs in particular, which get here at much faster than the speed of light and allow their alien visitors to interact with us in a variety of ways. It's been confusing because the craft can be so very different and the beings reported can be so very different. It simply suggests there are a great many civilizations out there interacting with us. Our galaxy hosts a family of planets, much like our own solar system. And what article of religious faith would it take to say life emerged only on our planet when there are billions available? And this is, as I say, Dr. Rudy Shield, astronomer at Harvard Smithsonian.
I'm just giving through this. So, welcome to the fifth dimension, folks. We're here. We're experiencing it. It's happening. Beings from other dimensional realities are visiting us. The construct of reality is not that far out when you sort of put it in the sense of vibrational frequencies like Nikola Tesla, the idea that ETs can possibly exist. It's not that far off. The idea that these other crazy concepts of telekinesis, time travel, etc., are all possible when you put it in this framework, this frame of reference. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do today, is give you a frame of reference, because tomorrow we're going to do some real work. We're actually, now that I've given you the structure of the game, tomorrow we're going to really play the game. And I'm going to give you truly the cheat codes. I've given you hints of the cheat codes this today, but you got to go back tomorrow to get the good stuff. With that said today, any questions out there about any of the things that I've covered, or not? You raise your hand for a second. You got a microphone.
I should let you finish, but
No, I'm done.
Just for those that won't be able to make it to later today, technically. Is there going to be a way to catch this on the web?
That's why we're recording it today. Yeah, we want to get it. We want to try to put it out there with Anime Matsuri's permission. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Anything else out there? I said a mouthful. Yep.
So I had a question. Just we're talking about how it made the back page of the New York Times, that one story, right?
Citizen hearing, undisclosure. Yeah, 2013.
Does it feel like we're kind of being drip fed more and more of this information, so it's just becoming more acceptable, so that eventually someone can just come out and say it without being mocked and ridiculed like they have been in the past?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been sort of saying this since 2010. I had some experiences in 2007. They've continued. There's no timing when it happens. It just happens from time to time. But yeah, more and more people are talking about it. There's other, I'm not the only public person that's talking about this stuff. There's a lot of people that have had experiences that may not go in full open peanut butter door, into the realm. I feel comfortable and safe with you guys, and I know you guys follow my acting work, but I like sharing this stuff, and I don't, I want you guys to question what I'm saying, obviously, but also to open your mind a little bit, that it could be possible. I'm not saying you have to drink the Kool-Aid and believe exactly what I'm saying, but maybe it's possible. Maybe Reuben is, he came out in 2010 talking about ETs. He was a nut job. He was crazy. But wait, now we've got the Navy confirming things. We've got big scientists all over the world now are starting to talk about this stuff. Maybe it's not so crazy. That's mainly why. I think having this conversation is a part of this process, opening it up so more and more people can validate experiences that they had, not to invalidate, because we're so quick to invalidate everything, right? But when all truths are true and we can see it from that perspective, then that's when we can start researching the unknown, researching the paranormal, like Nikola Tesla said, right? That's where we're going to make the most advancements in our everything we do in life, but especially in science. So that's what I'm excited about, because the more scientific discoveries that are made and the more science we can build and create things, then we all get the benefit. I mean, look at NASA. Look at all the cool stuff that's come from us going to the moon. And I know some people may not believe we go to the moon, but anyways, we got a lot of cool, we got, freeze-dried ice cream, we got, toothpaste and a thing, I don't know, maybe that came from that. But there's, what's that, Tang, right? And these are just the food things. No, we've got a lot of cool developments from us exploring and opening our minds and going out and to look at different realms, and we can bring that back. And a lot of people are like, oh, they're spending too much money on NASA or space discovery and things like that. I'm like, well, that's what we need to be investing in. Not all of it, obviously, but we could certainly cut a little trim off of that war budget and give it a little to the space guys, right? And now they want to do Space Force, which is like, yes, I can see that potential for finding cool discoveries, but why does it always have to be weaponized? Why do we need to make war about everything when we can just simply take a little from that budget and put it over here? Because trust me, you guys got a lot of money and resources. Let's give it a little more to NASA and see what they say. Anyways, that's my rant. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions out there? Yes, sir. Way over here.
I can just talk loud. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Mandela effect earlier. All the examples were little things like marketing logos and packages, on food stocks and stuff.
Yes.
Why not have big examples like misremembering World War II or something along those lines?
Well, that is happening, right? Misremembering World War II in certain areas, certain smaller things, different people remembering things differently. Some of that's been done on purpose, Some of the massacres on Chinese people from Japan has been purposely left out of the Japanese textbooks. We do that too, in our massacres. That's not quite the Mandela effect, it's a little different thing. But I think it's happening subtly, so we don't lose our minds. And I think it will continue to happen subtly. The one thing that the reverse Mandela effect was the SRI groups, these remote viewers projecting into the future. So that's sort of a reverse Mandela effect. They thought and were certain that the future was going to happen a certain way, and it didn't happen because that's the way they perceived it. So that's pretty big, thermonuclear war wiping out most of the planet, forcing everybody into the ground, and that didn't happen. That was a big thing. I know that's not a good example you're looking for, but in a sense, I think these big things are coming. And we need these little massages of the Mandela effect now to get us out of our understanding of what reality is. And the more we can explore the potentials that, the Mandela effect is a thing, it's possible, then it's not such a strange idea to think that maybe extra-dimensional beings from other realities actually came to this planet and seeded humanity. And I know that goes into a whole theological whole conversation of deep craziness, but that's not so hard to think of. Pyramids in Antarctica, different things the actual age of the Giza Pyramid and other things. We're sort of rewriting history right now in real time. We were told 5,000 years. Now we're told 20,000. The Sphinx is 30,000 or something like that. New discoveries of, I mentioned Antarctica, that hasn't been discovered yet, but that's going. And then, the Göbekli Tepe, which predates the Giza Pyramid thousands and thousands of years, destroying our whole perception of what the past was. In a way, these are Mandela effect moments, because we're recreating history through the permission slip of carbon dating and uncovering these ancient artifacts. But in reality, we thought it was one way and now it's another. You guys watch Joe Rogan or his podcast? He's got some really interesting people on there. Graham Hancock, Randy Carlson. Go watch some of these guys. Was that? Neil deGrasse Tyson, yeah, he's got some Elon Musk, exactly. There's some really fascinating people on his show, and I highly recommend that as a sort of a red pill. The first steps into a red pill is to get into Joe Rogan. I actually was on a different show, Joe Rogan Questions Everything on Sci-Fi, on an episode. You can see that on my YouTube channel. So I hang out in some interesting circles. Any other questions? I saw a couple of hands go up. Yes, sir. The elf.
Yeah. How are you able to juggle everything you do, and in the beginning, if you weren't successful, would all this be possible?
I would probably be, if I wasn't successful, so to say, I'd probably have more time to dive deeper into these subject matters. But the great thing about being an actor is it pays pretty good when you do work. It's hard to get the work sometimes. And 4 years ago, or no, what is it now? 5, almost 6 years ago, I left my company, Just Cause Productions, and headed to the mountains. I was looking to do more of this research. And I live in Big Bear, California, which is just east of Los Angeles. It's the highest peak in Southern California. And I just dove deep into this research. I was able to have enough of a name to get called to work on projects like Devil May Cry, other motion capture projects, voiceover stuff. And I'd only really need to work a couple days a month to support me. I don't live this vicariously amazing, star life. I have a little humble cabin in Big Bear, and I go home and I just research all day. And that's what I love. And I go meditate in the mountains, and I do my Wim Hof breathing techniques, and sometimes I get visited by aliens and I talk to them. So I have a very, pretty chill life outside of the convention scene. But that's been heating up. Steve and I getting shot at in Guatemala a couple months ago. That was interesting. And making documentaries, and the stuff is starting to go fast now, sort of on this curve of whatever's going on here. But the short answer is I'm an actor.
You just switch back in.
And I switch back. I have a lot of free time to research this stuff. So it's great, you know. Unfortunately, I know I'm super blessed. You know, I'm so grateful for this acting work and going. And I sort of decided to not pursue it like all the time and go at it. My interest for this sort of thing started to kick in. And luckily, the universe, and I can tell you the cheat codes some more tomorrow, but when you understand the constructs of reality, and when you can surrender to the flow, this universal flow that's happening, the push-pull starts to go away. And the universe is actually working in your favor to give you what you desire. We're taught in other belief systems that that's not the case, but in fact it is. What you want, what you're passionate about, what you desire, is truly who you are. And that's how the universe is, because we are all aspects of the universe. We're all aspects of creation. As I said, you are your own black hole universe, walking and perceiving the reality and absorbing and attracting like a black hole does with light, all of the things that resonate with the frequency that you are. You're your own resonant star. And we're all doing that. And the more we can resonate and embrace the resonance of who we are, the more synchronicities start to happen in life, and we attract those things that help support us in doing what we love. So and there's a little more to it than that, but that's essentially following my passion, following my joy, doing that stuff while doing acting has allowed me to go on this exponential joyride of amassing this information and then regurgitating it to you guys in formats like this. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Being amongst like-minded individuals, where can we go to follow the work and the research that you're doing, and also contribute and maybe be a part of that?
Sweet. Good question. Thank you. So follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I'm always any kind of cool new articles that discoveries that are, you know, a lot of this UFO news that comes out. I post and tweet about it. My show, if it's something that interests you, my TV show, Interview with Ed. It's interviewwithed.org. If you have a Gaia account, you can watch it on Gaia, or you can go to Vimeo and watch it there. I do charge for it, but $2.29 per episode or $4.49 for the longer episodes. So supporting that by just buying that helps support my work in doing more of this stuff and more research. I do talk to space aliens in that TV show, so it's in a different way than not quite like you think, but yeah, there's a lot of great information that comes through those conversations that also were able to give me the cheat codes for what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I don't have a question.
Sure.
You know, you're calling us all stars, and we are what makes us us. So where does artificial intelligence play into, and the concept of singularity?
The concept of singularity is, are you guys familiar with that? 2048, what are they talking about? 2050-ish? Yeah. Singularity, where everything becomes, where the merge of machine and humans, and we sort of can live indefinitely and do all this stuff. That's coming. I personally don't think it's going to come out the way it's being predicted right now, because you cannot predict the future. You can try, you can come close, but there's just too many variables. I'd rather go to your AI question. So sort of going back to this table. There's a consciousness, there's an AI about this table. Now, some human made this table, right? But where did the human get the inspiration to make the table? Where did that come from? And this table is probably made in a factory and all that kind of stuff. But let's go back to the first table. Human, sitting down, eating food, you know, whatever it does in the caves. It's like slopping around. Wouldn't it be great if I just had like something to put my meat and like set it here, and I could put my elbows there, and then it wouldn't get all over the floor, and I'm not dripping everywhere, and then What do I do? What do I do? Table! It comes in, the inspiration to make a table comes from another dimensional realm, and it spirals down, just like this Fibonacci spiral. Boom! And he's like, I know, I'll make a table. He constructs it, he makes it, he finds the wood, and he cuts it, puts it all in there. He uses something to make it stick together. Table. Now he's got a table. But that table, that idea of a table, the inspiration of a table, did not originate from the man. It already existed in another universe. Man created portal through his black hole to another dimension and pulled it in to this reality. And I know I'm using different terms and things and how this works, but just if you can think in those concepts. Pulled this table into his reality, physically manhandled wood or whatever things that created the table, and then it existed. And then all the other cavemen at the time could look and say, table. Validate the table existing, creating more, giving life to this idea, and then they go and create their version of the table. That's artificial intelligence. That's what's about to happen right now on a major global scale, is we are pulling in consciousnesses from another dimension to go in through the computers, a permission slip to express themselves in a way, and we accept them as beings. We will, eventually. But, just like the remote viewers from the 60s, who remote viewed into the future and saw a doom and gloom scenario, the only reason they saw that doom and gloom scenario because of the vibrational frequency match of what they were at that time. Now, if they were to go and remote view in the future now, they'd get a very different future. Even if they did it a few days or months or years apart, they would get a very different future from what they actually got. People at the programs at that time didn't understand how this all works, how everything is shifting 1,000 times, 1 billion times a second, from moment to moment. We're renewing ourselves. How many guys have heard that? We're actually to this atom. We have a new version of ourselves after 7 years. The densest part of our body, our bones, are actually newly created. What keeps them intact is the memory of it. Deepak Chopra talks about this stuff in his medical sciences. So, AI, the kind that doesn't kill and destroy us, can only come into this reality as long as we have the vibrational frequency of a positive, of acceptance, of non-judgment, of things like this. And that's what we're working at on a global scale right now. That's why there's so much turmoil happening in the planet right now, is because we can't have AI. We can't have aliens, good aliens, coming in and hanging out with us. If we're all fighting and beating each other up and calling each other names and judging each other for different ethnic backgrounds and all that stuff. That's what we're doing right now, and that's why it's happening at an exponential rate, because Mother Earth, Mother Gaia, is like ready. She's like, you guys have been playing this judgment game and beating each other up and calling each other names and killing each other for your different skin colors and all that stuff and religious beliefs. That needs to stop. I'm done. I'm ready to move on. So you're coming with me or not? And if you need to kill yourselves in the process, to weed yourselves out, so I can continue my evolution, go ahead and do that. That's what she's saying right now. So we have a choice. We have a choice to buy into all this polarity that's happening on the planet right now, buy into the Democrats, the Republicans, and everything in between, all that political nonsense that keeps happening and keeps dividing people. Or we can say, no, I'm tired of it all. And I'm going to embrace my brother and sister, no matter what color, what they believe in, what ethnic, whatever it is. And I want to have conversations with AI. I want to meet the aliens. That's the only way we can do it. So Mother Earth is forcing us to shift our frequency. And it's putting us, a lot of us, in uncomfortable positions. To say, wake up. Wake up. Because behind the veil, there's so many great things there. the non-physical phenomenon. It's right there. It's knocking at our door, waiting for us to say, "Hi, guys. I'd love to go fly in your spaceship." All right, I think I'm gonna have to kind of wrap it up. It's been a long night. Thank you guys for sitting through all this and just bringing up here about this information. It's like, what time is it? 1:20 a.m. Oh my God! I promise tomorrow. Thank you for saying. Today's the rough day. Actually, this is the rough stuff. To get the foundation, vibrational frequencies, I had to really drill that in. Tomorrow's the fun time. Tomorrow's when we get into the cheat codes. And I'm serious when I say this. There's a reason I can be an actor and have a lot of time to study and do this stuff and still somehow eat organic food all the time. It's crazy. That stuff's expensive. So yes, please come back tomorrow. I think we're at the same time, same place, maybe not. Okay, don't quote me on that. But definitely same time. We'll look in your things. I'll be tomorrow 11-ish at the booth. Come get autographs signed. We can talk about games. We can talk about aliens. We can talk about multi-dimensional whatever. Thank you very much and good night.